For decades, if you were a global car company like Volkswagen or Toyota, China was your golden goose. It was the biggest market in the world, and frankly, they dominated it. But in just the last couple of years, that whole kingdom has started to crumble. Foreign brands are in full retreat, their market share is just evaporating, and a whole new wave of local Chinese companies has completely rewritten the rulebook. So the big question is, how did these giants lose their grip on the most important car market on Earth, almost overnight? Well, the answer really starts with one pretty shocking number.
Okay, so take a look at this. This is the Volkswagen ID.3. In Germany, it'll set you back about 35,000 bucks. But in China, you can get the exact same car for less than half that price. This isn't just some holiday sale. It's a sign of a vicious price war, a desperate fight for survival in a market that has changed way faster than anyone, and I mean anyone, saw coming.
And this gets us to the first huge point you have to understand. This isn't some small trend or a little shift in what people want. No, the entire foundation of the Chinese car market has completely flipped on its head. And this number? This is the exact moment it happened. In July of last year, for the very first time, sales of what are called new energy vehicles, or NEVs, crossed the halfway mark. Think about that. More than half of all new cars sold in China were either electric or hybrid. The niche officially became the new normal.
Now, it's super important to note that when we talk about NEVs in China, it's a really broad term. It includes the pure battery electric cars, like a Tesla, but it also includes plug-in hybrids, which are a huge deal there. They have a battery for city driving and a small gas engine for longer trips. This gives Chinese companies a massive advantage because they can offer a whole range of options to buyers.
And when you look at who's winning in this new market, wow, it's all about the local players. Just look at the sheer dominance here. One company, BYD, has over a quarter of the entire NEV market to itself. To put that in perspective, they sell almost 7 times more of these cars than Tesla does in China. The old foreign brands, they're just a tiny sliver, buried somewhere in that others category.
And that all led to this absolutely symbolic moment. For the first time ever, a Chinese brand, BYD, became the #1 best-selling car brand in the country, period. They didn't just win the electric race, they took the crown for the whole market, finally dethroning Volkswagen after decades and decades of dominance. So how on earth did they do it?
Well, they didn't win by playing the old game better than the veterans. They won because they threw the entire rulebook out the window and wrote a brand new one for the electric and digital age.
And their new playbook really comes down to 3 things. First, just insane speed. Think of it like fast fashion, but for cars. They can design and launch new models or push major software updates in a fraction of the time it takes the legacy guys with their old 5 to 7 year plans. Second, they control everything in-house, from the batteries to the computer chips to the software. That gives them total control over cost and innovation. And third, and this might be the most important one, they build software-first cars.
This quote right here just nails it. For 100 years, a car was all about the engine, the horsepower, the hardware. But for the new generation of Chinese buyers and the companies serving them, the car is basically a giant piece of consumer electronics first and a way to get around second. The digital experience, that big screen, the apps, the voice assistant, that's the main event.
And this software-first approach completely blew the doors open for new players. Take Xiaomi, the phone company. This number, over 30,000, is how many cars they delivered in a single month last year, just after launching their very first car. It's proof that being a tech company is now a huge advantage in the car business.
Okay, so if that's the winning playbook, why couldn't the big, established giants just copy it? Well, it's because they were caught in what you could call the legacy trap.
Basically, their greatest strengths suddenly became their biggest weaknesses. They were still making tons of money from their old gas-guzzling cars, so it was hard to go all in on electrics. Their joint ventures in China, which used to be the key to the kingdom, now just slowed everything down. They completely misjudged what people wanted, selling decades of brand history when buyers just wanted a killer user interface. And all this left them totally exposed when local companies started that brutal price war.
And the real-world impact is just brutal. I mean, just look at Honda's sales from July of last year. One of their biggest partnerships in China saw sales get cut in half compared to the year before. These aren't just little dips. These are the signs of a brand in a freefall.
Or look at this contrast from Volkswagen. It's fascinating. Globally, their electric car strategy seems to be working great. In Europe, their EV sales shot up by almost 90% in the first half of last year. Huge win. But in China,
That same part of their business completely collapsed, down over 34%. So it's not that they can't build electric cars. It's that the ones they build just aren't cutting it in the world's most competitive EV market.
So what's the problem? So often, it comes right back to that user experience. This quote from a Chinese car reviewer really says it all. The software in a lot of these foreign EVs just felt slow, buggy, and frankly, years behind what the local brands were offering. And when the car is a smartphone on wheels, having a terrible operating system is a fatal flaw.
And this brings up a really key question for you to think about. These joint ventures were once the only way for foreign brands to get into China. But how do those same structures now act as a brake? How can you possibly move at China speed when every single decision has to be approved by two completely different companies, often on opposite sides of the world?
But this story is far from over. Because as that price war in China becomes totally unsustainable, the battlefield is starting to expand way beyond China's borders.
And here's the latest twist in the plot. The price war got so destructive that the Chinese government itself is now stepping in. Top regulators are basically telling car makers to cool it, to end what they call irrational competition, and to try and bring some stability back to the market.
And these numbers show you exactly why they're worried. Look at this. Even as EV sales were going up, the constant price cuts meant that revenue grew way slower, and the industry's profits actually fell by almost 12%. Companies were selling more cars while making less money. You know, that's a race to the bottom, and Beijing wants it to stop.
So this government intervention raises a massive question for the future. Will a calmer market offer a lifeline to the struggling foreign brands, giving them time to catch up? Or will it just lock in the dominance of the most efficient local players like BYD, who are already built to survive on thinner margins?
Well, regardless of what happens at home, the Chinese champions are not waiting around to find out. This number, that's the year-over-year explosion in BYD's revenue from international markets. They are pushing aggressively into Europe, Southeast Asia, and South America, using the brutal competition in China as their ultimate training ground.
So, here's the bottom line. The legacy automakers lost China because they were playing by an old rulebook in a game that had already changed. And now, the companies that wrote the new rules are taking their playbook global. The fight for China's market might be entering a new phase, but what happens when these new, battle-hardened champions come for the rest of the world? That's a question every car company on the planet is asking right now.